It's the semi-finals of the playoffs, so nailing those start-sit decisions has never been more important. Luckily, Tom and myself are here to get your wide receiver rankings in order and make sure you nail those start-sit decisions. We're going to kick it off at the top. We have got Puka Nacua, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Nico Collins, AJ Brown, Michael Wilson, and CD Lamb. AJ Brown, I say every week, every time the Eagles force him the ball, it stutters up the offense. It becomes an unfunctional offense. Yeah, they seem to just keep feeding him at the moment. Do you think it's going to continue into week 16?
Yeah, I do. I think that they want to make him happy. I think that the team feel like that's something they have to prioritize. And it's probably worth just mentioning, like, this has to be the first time we've had AJ Brown in the top tier, maybe all season. I think
since the first few weeks, I think. Probably, yeah.
But AJ Brown, to his point, is the wide receiver 12 in PPR points per game. And he's definitely done everything he needs to. Now, and going up against the Commanders, across the course of the 4 videos this week, we're going to keep making this point, but the Commanders' defense absolutely sucks. They are 32nd in EPA pass defense allowed. They've allowed the 13th most schedule-adjusted wide receiver fantasy points, and the only reason why they've not allowed more is because teams normally get up early and then just run the ball on them. Now, I would imagine that the Eagles are looking to get the passing game going a bit more this week. Like last week against the Raiders, they only had 18 pass attempts, and a good chunk of those went to Dallas Goedert. So a bounce-back spot here for A.J. Brown wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. And the Commanders, they just can't stop anybody. Like, I could reel off a bunch of different statistics, but they're awful against the pass.
Michael Wilson has been the overall wide receiver 1 since week 11. That's more points scored than Jackson Smith-Njigba, Puka Nacua, AJ Brown, Nico Collins, Amon-Ra St. Brown. He has been an absolute superstar. It's looking like maybe Marvin Harrison might be back. He is practicing, although we've kind of ranked him without Marvin Harrison expected to play. Is Michael Wilson going to carry people to fantasy titles, or is this going to come back to the ground with a big old bump?
I could definitely be a little bit nervous about this one. I mean, you mentioned it, like in the games without Marvin Harrison, he's had target shares 32%, 33, 36, and 29%. But in the games with Marvin Harrison, he's never been over 20%. If Marvin Harrison's back, he's somebody I'd be willing to play a little bit, because I just don't think anybody will want to do that in DFS. But on the whole, you can't not play Michael Wilson here, and the Falcons have allowed 5 wide receiver touchdowns in the last 3 games.
Yeah, it's been quite a ride, and I think as long as he's active, as long as he's out there, and especially if Marvin Harrison isn't, he's got to be slotted into your lineup. We have not ranked Drake London. At the time of recording, he's just logged a limited practice on Thursday, Tom. If he were to play, he's the wide receiver 3 in points per game this year. Would he slot himself into this elite tier?
Yeah, well, we've seen players come back slow from these PCL injuries, so there would be a little bit of trepidation about that. But Kirk Cousins looks more functional now than he did earlier on in the season when he filled in for Michael Penix. He seems to have found a little bit of rhythm. They seem to be working out how to play around him. Kirk Cousins and Drake London obviously played together plenty last season, so it's not like they don't have that relationship. The Cardinals are not a good defense right now. They rank 22nd against the pass in EPA. They're banged up there. They haven't really played very well. But both these teams like to play fast. Like the Cardinals play the 4th most plays per game, the 5th quickest time to the snap per game. And that forces their opponents into faster games, which if that gives us a pass-heavy script, then look, I've got Drake London in my home league. He carried me to the 1 seed in a bye. I was grateful that I didn't need him last week while sitting on a bye, but if he's out there, I'll be playing him.
Absolutely. And in the A tier, we've got Chris Olave, Jameson Williams, George Pickens, and Mike Evans. George Pickens has carried people to the fantasy playoffs, and he has burnt them the last 2 weeks. Where are you with George Pickens? Can he be a wide receiver 1 for you, or would you rather be starting him as a flex option?
I think we're kind of in dropping him down territory. You know, there was that point where it was like, if you had George Pickens, you probably had him as your wide receiver 2 or 3 on your team, but he was giving you wide receiver 1 production. And then you get these 2 games in a row where it's just not really been there. He's been below 10 fantasy points in each of the last 2 games. He's been below 20% target share in each of the last 2, and 10% target share last week, which was a season low. This doesn't feel like an incredible matchup for him. The Chargers, they play the 5th most too high coverage. What's the one thing that too high is said to do really well? Take away the deep ball. What's George Pickens been relying on? Deep ball. And yeah, they've expanded more for him over time. But you look at things between CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens, when you look at too high safety metrics, like CeeDee Lamb pops against them because he's finding all that space in the middle. George Pickens sees all his efficiency numbers drop.
Yeah, and then also in this tier, we've got Mike Evans. I guess it's the same question again. What's your trust level on Mike Evans after he came back with a bang last week?
Yeah, I mean, he only played 70% of the routes last week, which is 25% lower than Chris Godwin. It seems like they're possibly not sure how to use Emeka Egbuka, Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin all at the same time, particularly when you throw in Jalen McMillan as well. But Mike Evans, for his point, wide receiver 11, despite only catching 50% of his targets, but he just went off for 132 yards. Like, now, against zone coverage, you can look at it and say, Baker Mayfield's been very poor against zone coverage this year. He ranks 33rd in QB rating against it, 39th in completion rate. Would he have done better against that if Mike Evans had been out there? Maybe. I mean, Carolina play the 2nd most zone coverage. Mike Evans has been reasonable against it with 2.4 yards per route run. So I don't see enough to push me away from it. But I do worry a little bit about Baker, and we touched on that in the quarterback video. But I think that Mike Evans, immediately we saw it, is the main choice for Baker Mayfield. I think that carries into the red zone, which is important.
And the most important stat when it comes to Mike Evans, 243 yards per game needed to hit that magic 1,000. So, yeah, we're going to see 50 screen passes to Mike Evans just so he can get there. Before we dive into the B tier, though, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button. The off-season is just around the corner, and that is when this channel kicks into overdrive, and we get you ready for all your best ball leagues, all your rookie drafts, and everything else in between. In the B tier, we do have Cortland Sutton, DK Metcalf, Zay Flowers, Jauan Jennings, Tutori McMillan, and Devonta Smith. DK Metcalf has been an absolute headache to decide what he's going to be and what he's going to do each week. We see low target volumes, and it's just a case of whether he breaks one or whether he scores a touchdown. So, Tom, is he going to break one? Is he going to score a touchdown this week?
He definitely has the potential to do so. I mean, you know, wide receiver 7 against the Ravens, and then wide receiver 22 last week. The Lions defense is ending the year stinking things up for the 2nd year in a row, particularly against the pass. They have allowed a league high 302 passing yards per game since week 11. They've allowed a league high 16 completions of 20 plus yards since week 11, which is 5 more than anyone else. They've allowed the 3rd most touchdowns on first read throws since week 11. So there's all these kind of things where you look at it and go, I think that the Steelers are in a good matchup going into the Dome. You know, Aaron Rodgers wants to have one last good game against the Lions. And DK Metcalf, for his point, like, he's been over 10 yards per target in back-to-back games, and he hadn't been over 8 in any of the previous 5. So the Steelers are letting it rip a little bit more at the minute. And it's just kind of going to come down to, can they keep it going on the road in this kind of high-pressure matchup? And I think that DK Metcalf is a fine wide receiver 2 this week, but I couldn't push him into wide receiver 1 territory.
That's kind of where I settle as well. I think there's potential there. I think they need him this week, which means I think we're probably going to see some creative touches, force-fed the ball in screen game and that side of things. So hopefully we see that target volume tick up. Another player who could see a big volume this week, Jauan Jennings. Since he declared himself fully fit in week 9, he has been the wide receiver 20 in points per game, averaging 14.7. No Ricky Pearsall potentially this week. Could it be a really nice week to slot Jauan Jennings into your lineup?
Yes, it could be because they're playing against the Indianapolis Colts, whose defense has been very fantasy viable this year. I mean, they rank 14th best against the pass in EPA allowed, but it's just been slowly declining over the last few weeks. They allow the sixth most schedule adjusted fantasy points to the wide receiver position. And even though Jauan Jennings is coming off a real low point in target share of 13.3% last week, it doesn't really matter because last week, he scored 2 touchdowns, and now he's had 6 touchdowns over his last 6 games. Like, the Colts since week 11 have allowed the second most passing yards per game. This is a perfect spot for Jauan Jennings.
In the C tier, we do have Terry McLaurin, Lad McConkey, Wandale Robinson, Justin Jefferson, DJ Moore, Jacoby Myers, Chris Godwin, Jalen Waddle, Jaden Reed, Luther Burden, Michael Pittman, and Emeka Egbuka. Tom, 4.3, 13.9, 2.2, and 4. Those are the last 4 fantasy points scored for Lad McConkey. Do you have any faith in a must-win semi-final matchup slotting him into your lineup despite this potential great matchup?
I do, because it's going up against the Cowboys, whose defense has been there for the taking plenty this year. Their cornerback position, still a lot of weird stuff going on there. And they're not a strong unit. The Cowboys are dead and buried. The Chargers need to win this matchup. Justin Herbert looked better last week. So there's always kind of little bits of it tick up. And then the Cowboys allow the highest catch rate in the league to slot receivers at 76.4%. They've allowed 10 touchdowns to slot receivers this year. Only 3 teams have allowed more. So I think this is as good as it's going to get for Lad McConkey right now.
And also in this tier, we do have DJ Moore. It's looking like no Rome Odunze, no Luther Burden, both ruled out on Thursday. Is it wheels up for DJ Moore and a huge target share this week?
Yeah, I mean, Luther Burden led the team with a 25% target share last week, led the team in yardage as well. Now you remove him out of it and you're talking DJ Moore, Colston Loveland, Olamide Zacchaeus, DeAndre Swift, like Cole Kmet. Who's stepping up there? Like, DJ Moore hasn't been consistent. He's had a habit of having these good games recently, and then he follows it up by having not only one poor game, but having a second poor game after it before then popping up for another good game. So you won't feel good about it, but like DJ Moore, that touchdown last week, the one which Caleb Williams threw with like an impossible level of being able to complete it, was fantastic. That has to earn more trust. I think that DJ Moore has been a good team player this year. Like, the Bears have talked about how he's never whinged about not seeing as much target volume as he'd liked. I mean, he only had 5 targets against the Bears, but this week it feels like it's potentially going to be a better situation for him. Like, the Bears going up against the Packers, that's not an easy game, but the Packers, you can get at the Packers. Like, Green Bay, they have their moments, but because they play so much zone coverage, if you've got a good offensive coordinator who can scheme things in between those zones, I really think that's where DJ Moore's going to eat.
Also in this tier, we've got Jalen Waddle, who's had a sneaky decent year this year. It's currently the wide receiver at 15 in fantasy points, but he has had a career high in ADOT. He's been used downfield an awful lot more. Noodle arm quarterback Tua Tagovailoa is out. We've got noodle arm quarterback Quinn Ewers in. Do you think that affects things for Waddle? And are you incredibly nervous relying on Quinn Ewers in your fantasy playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, I would have been slightly worried about Jalen Waddle anyway, going up against DJ Turner, who's kind of emerging as one of the better shadow cornerbacks in the league. Now, Zay Flowers got a couple over on him last week, but on the whole, when DJ Turner's matched up against teams wide receiver ones, it's gone pretty well for the Bengals. Like, the Bengals defense has crept up slowly in efficiency metrics over the course of a year. They've allowed the 8th fewest fantasy points to the position. Part of that's because teams can run on them. Part of it's because the Bengals haven't driven, things towards the passing game for opponents as much as they would have liked. But Jalen Waddle should have been set up for a perfect situation here, and removing Tua from the lineup just makes him borderline just a very difficult play now.
If you are agonising over those flex spots or that last minute start sit decision, dive in the comments. Make sure you're picking Tom and I's brain, and we will give you the correct answer to nail that start sit decision. In the D tier, we've got Brian Thomas Jr., Stefon Diggs, Keenan Allen, and Deebo Samuel. I was convinced to start this year with Stefon Diggs that he was going to be eased in off the back of the injury. But at this point of the season, he was going to be an every down player and a huge part of this Patriots offense. Last week, he ran 50% of snaps, 57% of routes, and a pathetic 14% target share. This is all while we see Mac Hollins with a 38% target share. What on earth is going on in New England?
Well, yeah, I mean, to just further expand on that, you go back over the last 3 weeks, and Stefon Diggs has seen route participation, snap share rates across those 3 weeks in each of them lower than the first 3 weeks of the season when he was coming back from his ACL injury. So I think there's got to be something schematic. Maybe this was a case of they want Mac Hollins out there. Maybe Mac Hollins is more of a willing blocker in the running game. And they've seen some of these games be easier to line up and say, we're going to run the ball here, and Stefon Diggs isn't going to give us much in the blocking game, which is pretty believable. I don't have any numbers to back that up. But going up against the Ravens, we talked about this in the running back video. That is not a good matchup for Trevion Henderson. The Ravens have been excellent against the run over the last few weeks, so maybe it turns back to the passing game, and maybe Stefon Diggs gets more involved. Stefon Diggs did grow up in Maryland, so like homecoming game, maybe
we're clutching at straws there. Look, yeah, Matt Collins is, a borderline tight end out there. He's one of the best run blocking wide receivers in the league. I get having him out there, but 38% target share when Stefon Diggs is out there feeding on scraps is absolutely bonkers. And I really hope for this offense to take the next step and be competitive in the playoffs. We need to see Stefon Diggs commanding a higher target share. We also need to see Carl Williams out on the field a little bit more than sub 10%. In the E tier, we have got Jordan Addison, Khalil Shakir, Adonai Mitchell, Jalen Coker, Jaden Higgins, Troy Franklin, and Xavier Worthy. Jalen Coker, I was a big fan in the offseason. It's taken a little while, but he is starting to produce and is definitely on the fantasy radar once again.
Massively so. I mean, like he's gone for at least 50 receiving yards in 3 of his last 4 games, found the end zone in each of his last 2. Since week 11, he's averaging over 8.5 PPR points per game, which doesn't sound a lot on paper, but that's right around wide receiver 23, wide receiver 24 in that range. Like if you're telling me this is a low end wide receiver 2, and we're still ranking him down here, very much flex viable, and particularly in this game, which is going to put so much in the playoff push for both the Bucks and the Panthers. Now, Tampa have allowed the 3rd most passing yards per game since week 3. They've allowed the highest completion rate on throws 10 to 19 yards deep since week 11, which is an area where Jalen Coker is going to play. And then they're also the worst defense in the league against slot receivers since week 11, again, where Jalen Coker sees plenty of snaps. So, yeah, I think that this is a sneaky, very good spot for Jalen Coker.
Also in this tier, we've got Xavier Worthy. He's been awful this year. He's cleared 12 fantasy points exactly once so far this year. But potentially Rashee Rice out this week with a concussion. Any interest in bumping up and potentially starting Xavier Worthy?
Yeah, it's tough. I was expecting better from Xavier Worthy this year because I thought that he would have enough chance to establish himself whilst Rashee Rice was out, that he would be really develop on what we saw last year, where down the stretch he became such an integral part of the Chiefs offense. And it hasn't happened now. Part of that you could point towards, yes, he's been injured for the first few games of the season. Then by the time he started finding his feet again, Rashee Rice is back. The offense has changed, been up and down, blah, 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 blah. But going up against the Titans, the Titans are just a weird defense. I can never tell whether they're going to have a good game or not. They rank 28th against the pass. They've allowed the 4th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. But with Gardner Minshew at quarterback, like so much of an unknown quantity. And I just think that even on waivers, I can probably go and find Jalen Coker. I could go and find Troy Franklin. I could go and find AD Mitchell and feel a little bit better about what I know I'm going to get from them.
Yeah, the production's not there. Yeah, we can dream up saying he's going to get put into that Rashee Rice role. Maybe he does, but with Gardner Minshew under center, I'm not sure I trust it, even if he does play that role. So, yeah, I'm happy looking elsewhere this week. In the F tier, we do have Kayshon Boutte, Rashid Shaheed, Darnell Mooney, Alec Pierce, Romeo Doubs, Jerry Doody, and Darius Slayton. If you made it this far into the video and you've not hit the thumbs up, you've not hit the hype, and you've not hit the subscribe button, what on earth are you doing? And while you're there, dive in the comments, leave us a comment, let us know your thoughts on the show. And of course, check out the other rankings videos we released this week.